thank you all for coming. And I want to be really brief because we're so thrilled to have Adele Diamond today. You probably have her biography in the announcement of Lunch and Learn, so I'll be really brief. What neuroscience Adele Diamond is learning about the brain is turning some of our most modern ideas about education on their heads. Her work is scientifically illustrating the educational power of things like play, sports, music, memorization, and reflection. What nourishes the human spirit, the whole person, it turns out, also hones our minds. My thinking about the education I received, about school testing, about what I want for my children, will never be the same after the conversation I had with neuroscientist Adele Diamond. Our treat to hear from you today, Adele.
Hi, everyone. I fear that activities needed for children to thrive are being cut from school curricula and from children's lives. Some of the most important skills, both for happiness and for success in school and in life, are executive functions. Almost all of these can be learned, practiced, and improved through play. While training and challenging executive functions is needed for them to improve, that alone is probably not enough to achieve the best results. I predict that the activities that will most successfully improve executive functions, the very best activities for improving executive functions, will not only work on directly improving executive functions by training and challenging them, but will indirectly support executive functions by lessening things that impair them, like stress or loneliness, and enhancing things that support them, like joy or physical vitality. Play does exactly that. Besides directly training and challenging executive functions, play also nourishes us socially, emotionally, and physically. Okay, what's the evidence? There are three core executive functions. I'm going to talk about inhibitory control first. That involves resisting a strong inclination to do one thing and instead do what's most appropriate or needed. There are two subparts of inhibitory control. At the level of attention, inhibitory control involves focused attention. Focused attention involves screening out distractions, like this little boy who's so intent on his math is screening out all the chaos or whatever going on in the classroom behind him. It also enables us to be able to concentrate and stay focused. And for a little child to walk on a line on the ground takes as much concentration and focused attention as for us to walk on a balance beam or a high wire. Once children get good at walking on a line on the ground, you can make it more difficult. And one of the ways to do that is that everybody, even the adults, takes a bell. And you follow maybe the most dysregulated child in the room. You're following the leader, walking on the line, and the goal is that nobody should make a sound with their bell. It's actually a walking meditation exercise, but you don't tell the children that. You tell them we're going to play a game. And if you think about it, these were things that were traditional in everybody's growing up years ago, right? You walked on logs outside in the woods. In other cultures, it's very common to carry things on your head, to be able to balance things like that. This was when we were in Bali this summer, and women even dance with pots on their head. And you see this all over the world. And when I was growing up, we used to have races, and you'd have to walk with the egg and not spill the egg, but get to the finish line as fast as you could. All of these are variants on that theme. Lots of things little children need to do require focused attention. And for the children, all of these things are play, although for us adults, many of them may look like work. Because for little children, some of the most joyful play is to practice what we adults do. When I worked with babies for my dissertation, and I would try to have a reward that they wanted to reach for, they didn't want those plastic keys. They wanted the real thing. They wanted those metal keys. They want what the adults have, what the adults are doing. Another example of traditional activity that involves focused attention is singing in a round, where you have to try to stay focused on what you're singing and not be distracted by the other groups. We tend to underestimate how capable young children really are. Next, you're going to see a 3-year-old displaying truly outstanding perseverance and focused attention, despite lots of distraction in the room. The reason he's able to do that is because he's so intent on what he's doing. It's because he so enjoys and is enthralled by what he's doing. There's no sound here, but I think it's pretty clear what's happening. There are a couple of things I wanted you to notice here. One of them is the importance of us adults exercising the inhibitory control to not intervene too early and to let the child have the joy of having solved it himself. And also, there's no way that a child of 3 is going to spend this kind of time and attention on something that's really boring to him. The reason he's doing it is because he's really engaged in what he's doing. Inhibitory control at the level of behavior is self-control. Self-control involves resisting temptations, not acting impulsively, thinking before you speak or act. Now, if you're a little kid, there's all kinds of instances when you need self-control. It seems to be ever-present. You have to wait your turn, raise your hand, don't grab another child's toy, don't pee in your pants. There are all of these don'ts for children. But no matter what your age, there are all kinds of times when you need self-control. Maybe somebody has hurt your feelings, and your first reaction is to hurt that person back. But if you exercise self-control, you can resist that temptation and not get in the feedback loop of tit for tat. Not blurting out the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe there's an old friend that you haven't seen for years, and you're so excited to see this dear friend. But your first reaction when you see her is, my God, how much weight you gained. You don't say that. You exercise self-control. And, let's say you've gotten very upset about something and dashed off an email. You exercise the self-control not to press send right away, right? There's so many instances where we need self-control. And you need self-control in order to have the discipline and perseverance to resist the many temptations to quit and not finish what you started. To keep working despite maybe being bored, maybe being frustrated at all the problems and difficulties, and certainly there are a lot more fun things calling you. And to continue to work, even though the reward might be a long time in coming. That requires a lot of inhibitory control, self-control. Evidence shows that discipline accounts for over twice as much of the variation in grades, whether you're in college or in younger grades, as does IQ. Discipline accounts for more than IQ. Self-control saves us from putting our foot in our mouth or making a social faux pas. Think of all the trouble you'd get in if you blurted out the first thing that came to mind, grabbed whatever you wanted without asking or paying, did other socially inappropriate, hurtful, or perhaps even illegal things. If we want to change, if we want to mend our ways, we need self-control. There are many ways we can help children succeed despite having weak inhibitory control. Young children are often capable of responding correctly if only some way can be found to cause them to wait before they respond, just for a few moments. We developed a test for 3 to 5-year-olds called the day-night test. It's a kind of Stroop test. When you see a white card with a sun, you're supposed to say night. And when you see a black card with a moon and stars, you're supposed to say day. So children start out performing correctly, but they often make mistakes. But I could see when I was working with them that when they took their time, they got it right. So how are we going to get them to take their time? Of course, asking them to wait is totally useless. So we came up with a procedure where the experimenter chants a little ditty after showing the card before the child responds. Now, you might think jabbering at the child when the child's trying to compute the answer might get in the way. But it turns out that it's incredibly helpful. In the normal condition, children of 3 are a chance, or 4 are a chance. But if you do that little ditty, they're up about 90% correct. Okay, so I didn't want to embarrass anybody else in my lab by showing them doing the ditty, so unfortunately you'll see me. Normally, a child only gets 1 condition, but for the movie crew, we did the same child getting it. And you'll see that the child is so impulsive that in the regular condition, the child sometimes will answer even before I've turned over the card. And the child knows the right answer. It's not a problem of memory, because every time he makes a mistake, he right away self-corrects. He knows the right thing, but he doesn't always say it. In this game, when you see this white card with a sun, you're supposed to say night. Can you say night?
Night.
Good. And when you see this black card with the moon, you're supposed to say day.
Day.
Yes. So what do you say when you see this?
Night.
Yes. And what do you say when you see this?
Morning. Night. Morning. Night. Morning. Night. Morning. Night. Night. Morning. Night. Morning.
Yes. Can we try it once more? This time, I'm going to sing a little ditty after I show you the card. And I don't want you to answer till after I'm finished singing, okay?
Okay.
Can we try that? Okay. So, think about the answer. Don't tell me. Now can you tell me? What do you say?
Morning.
Think about the answer. Don't tell me. Now what do you say?
Night.
Think about the answer. Don't tell me. Now.
Night.
Think about the answer. Don't tell me. Now.
Morning.
Think about the answer. Don't tell me. Now. Okay, and there are many instances where this can be really helpful. There's a program called PATHS, which is a social emotional add-on to the curricula in elementary schools. And in Paths, they teach the children when they get really upset, they shouldn't lash out. What they should do is get in turtle. They should act like a turtle and go into their shell, which means they should hold themselves really tightly and take a couple of deep breaths. Well, and this is brilliant, because first of all, they don't tell a child when you get really upset you should wait, because that's not going to do anything. They tell the child when you get really upset there's this alternative thing you should do. And the alternative thing happens to be really good at calming you down. Holding yourself tightly, taking deep breaths is a wonderful way to calm down. So there are many ways that you can use this strategy to help children. Okay, the second core executive function is working memory. Working memory involves holding information in mind to work or play with it. Working memory is absolutely critical for reasoning and for creative problem solving. For those require holding ideas and information in mind and playing with them, relating one to another, reordering priorities, and more. Working memory is critical for anything that unfolds over time, for that always requires holding in mind what came earlier and relating that to what's happening now. So that's critical for anything that involves language. It's obvious for oral language because you're not hearing what was said before, so you have to hold that in mind and relate that to what you're hearing now. But even at the level of reading, even at the level of a sentence, rarely do you see all the words at the same time. So you have to hold in mind what you read earlier and relate that to what you're reading now, and especially for longer things than just a sentence or a paragraph or a story. You need to challenge children's working memory so that it improves. And one of the ways to do that is with storytelling. Executive functions need to be continually challenged to see improvements, not just used, but challenged. And I'm a huge fan of storytelling. Does anybody know who these wonderful storytellers from Boston are? Yes. Yes. And the man is even more famous. Anybody? You see, there's not enough storytelling in the world today. That's Jay O'Callahan. Storytelling requires and invites a child's rapt attention for extended periods, sustained focus attention, and working memory to hold in mind all that's happened so far, the different characters' identities, the story details, and to relate that to what's being revealed now, all without the aid of the pictures on the page, puppets acting it out, or video. A researcher randomly assigned children in kindergarten and grade 1 to storytelling, where only the person telling the story could see the story, or story reading, where the reader kept turning the pages so the children could see the pictures on the page. And what they found was vocabulary and recall improved more in the children assigned to storytelling. Vocabulary, assessed at age 3, strongly predicts reading comprehension at 9 to 10 years of age. And let me repeat, storytelling increased vocabulary more than story reading. The conversation that takes place in the context of reading seems to have even more benefit than the reading itself. The more interaction between an adult reading or telling a story and the child, the more vocabulary improves. And this is just some references that show that. Now, we don't know why the researcher found more benefit from the storytelling than the story reading. But maybe one possibility is that when you're reading a story, you have to periodically break eye contact and look down at the book to see what the story is. But if I'm telling you a story, then I can maintain the interaction with you unbroken. And maybe that involves the child more and gets it more of an interaction with the child than if I'm periodically breaking it to look down. We don't know. That's just one possibility. While story reading is wonderful, I predict that storytelling should improve attention and working memory more because it taxes them more. And for older children, something like spoken word, the same idea. You have to hold information in mind. And there are lots of activities that involve this. These children have memorized the words of a song, and they're doing a performance. A fun game for practicing and improving working memory. Now, are you guys up for standing up and doing a little something, or should I skip this? You're up for it? Okay, everybody stand up. Put anything in your hands down. Leave your hands free. Okay, when you see a circle, you should raise your hands. Okay, excellent. Okay, what do you do when you see a circle? Yes, okay. When you see a square, you should hold your hands out, palm up. Good. Okay, what do you do when you see a square? Yes. What do you do when you see a circle? Yes, okay. Last one. When you see a triangle, you should put your fist on your heart. Okay? What do you do when you see a triangle? Yes. Square? Yes. Circle? Yes. Triangle? Yes. Okay, now you're ready. Okay, now I'm going to go through some of the shapes and you know what to do. Here you go. Okay, now you can add demands on inhibitory control and cognitive flexibility by changing the mappings. Okay, so now for the circle, clap your hands once. Okay, what do you do when you see a circle? Yes. Okay, for a square, palm out, fist on top. Okay? For what do you do for a square? Yes. Circle? Yes. Okay. Last one, salute for a triangle. Yes. Okay. So, what do you do for a triangle? Yes. Square? Yes. Circle? Yes. Triangle? Yes. Okay, now you're ready. Okay, here you go. Okay. Okay, you can sit down now. Sorry. One of the things I like about that is that nobody gets embarrassed. You're not asking one person to come up here and demonstrate it, and you know that everybody in the room has made mistakes. So it's no problem to make a mistake. An example of how to help children with fragile working memory is this thing from Tools of the Mind. They ask all the 4 or 5-year-olds in the room to each get a picture book and get in a pair with another child and take turns telling the story that goes with the pictures in your book. So the children are all excited. Everybody wants to tell their story, and nobody wants to be the listener. So what they do is they give one child a picture of an ear, and the teacher explains, ears don't talk, ears listen. And with this concrete reminder, the child's able to listen. Without it, she wouldn't be able to. And after a few months, they don't need it anymore because they've internalized it. So nonverbal signs and symbols can aid comprehension and memory a lot. Okay, the third core executive function is cognitive flexibility. And that involves being able to see an issue from different perspectives, think about something in a whole new way, thinking outside the box, seamlessly adjusting to change or unexpected situations. So cognitive flexibility involves having the flexibility to take advantage of a sudden opportunity, serendipity, instead of staying with what you had planned, to change course when you need to get to your desired goal despite unexpected obstacles seeming to block your way. Maybe you had that yesterday or today with the snow. And to admit you were wrong when you get more information. An example of poor cognitive flexibility is given by Alexander Graham Bell. When one door closes, another door opens. But we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the ones which open for us. And all of these activities require cognitive flexibility. They're walking in the woods and they don't know what they might find on the trail. Maybe their path is going to be blocked or there'll be a steep drop. The kids out there on the field may do something you hadn't expected, and all of a sudden you have to adjust to the activity on the field. And when the wind changes direction, you have to figure out how to keep your kite up there. All of these require cognitive flexibility. If there's a problem that we haven't been able to solve, Can you think outside the box to conceive of the problem, frame the problem in a whole new way, come up with a completely different way of attacking it? Einstein said, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Now, can you creatively see the same thing from different perspectives? For example, what unusual, crazy uses can you think of for a table? I mean, obviously, you can write on a table, you can eat on a table. What other things, outside the box things, could you do with a table?
It's a house.
Yes, it's a house. I can't hear what? Slide, great. A bed, yes. A stage, yes. Barricade. Yes, okay. Here are some I came up with. You can hide under it. You can turn it on its side to keep a door closed. You can turn it upside down to play horseshoes. You can use it as a percussion instrument, or you can cut it up for firewood. Okay, so the three core executive functions are inhibitory control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. And from those three cores, higher level executive functions like problem solving, reasoning, and planning are built. And problem solving and reasoning are what fluid intelligence is all about. So it's no surprise that fluid intelligence correlates incredibly highly with executive functions. Vygotsky emphasized the importance of social dramatic play for the development of the executive functions. And if you think about it, it works all three. Let's say you're playing cops and robbers, and you're one of the robbers and you're planning the robbery. You don't want to accidentally tell the cop, right? That would ruin the whole plan. You have to remember who's who. And you have to inhibit acting out of character. If you've chosen to be the baby in the family scenario, you can't all of a sudden get up and drive the fancy family car. You have to stay in character. And your friends may take that scenario in ways that you never imagined. So on the fly, in real time, you have to flexibly adjust. It's training working memory, inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And the children are just playing. The importance of action for learning, learning through doing, at any age, but especially for little kids. Hands-on learning. We evolved to be able to learn to help us act, to help us do what we need to do. We didn't evolve to be able to think or learn just for the sake of it. We evolved that ability because it was useful. Now think about it. Who's going to learn the route better, the driver or the passenger in the car? All of us know the answer, and all of us know why, right? The driver has to use the information to get someplace. The passenger is just passively sitting there. And unfortunately, too often in schools, we have kids sitting like you, like the passive passengers. And the teacher is up here learning the information very well. You learn something when you need it for something you want to do, when you need it for a problem you want to solve. My son gave me a brilliant lecture on how to program the VCR. It was clear, it was elegant, it was gorgeous. A week later, when I went to program the VCR, could I do it? No, because the week earlier, I hadn't paid attention with the mindset of actually using the information. Abraham Heschel said, the act teaches us the meaning of the act. There are many things that we only really understand by doing. Young children's learning needs to be active and hands-on. Many concepts can and should be introduced visually and tactilely before they're introduced using language. It helps a great deal to give children experiences with concepts first before attaching a verbal label to them. So for example, these pegboards only differ by one thing. They're not beautiful colors. They're all the same. In one case, they're all the same height, and they only differ in diameter. In the other case, they're all the same diameter and they only differ in height. Now, we don't tell the 3-year-olds that they differ in diameter. We don't use the word diameter. But in playing with these, the children are getting a visceral understanding of what diameter means, so that later, when the word is taught to them, they have an understanding of what it means. They have something to attach the word to. Here's another thing that Montessorians have 3-year-olds play with. Now, these don't differ. They're not all the same height. They're not all the same diameter. What are they all the same in? Anybody know? They're all the same in volume. El Sistema, the Venezuelan national system of youth and children. Oh, by the way, it is true that they were all the same shape. I should acknowledge that. In order to solve the puzzle, what you need is to realize the progression in volume. To know that they're all the same shape doesn't help you know what to put in the next hole. El Sistema was started by Jose Antonio Abreu in the mid-1970s. He envisioned classical music training as a way to rescue poor kids. The idea wasn't to make musicians. The idea was to help kids thrive, to develop community. It's provided free. It takes all children, even deaf, has reached over 500,000 children in 25 countries and 3 continents. There's some El Sistema programs in Boston, and the Conservatory Lab School in Brighton has it as part of the curriculum. The National Dance Institute was also founded in the mid-1970s by the remarkable ballet dancer Jacques d'Amboise. He was the best ballet dancer for 30 years of anybody in the world. Balanchine choreographed ballets for him. He's won all kinds of awards. He was a poor kid growing up in a poor neighborhood, a high school dropout headed for trouble. He happened to walk his sister to dance class one day, and the rest is history. So he figured if dance rescued him, maybe dance could rescue other poor kids. Again, the idea isn't to make professional dancers. The idea is to help kids thrive. It's provided free. It takes all kids, even those in wheelchairs and with severe physical handicaps, and it too has reached over 500,000 children in some of the poorest areas. And youth circus. I didn't know anything about this until a young woman came to me and said that she had been leading a youth circus group in her community, and that there are youth circuses in over 200 communities in North America, and that it's used as a way to help kids thrive. Almost 200 cities throughout the US have youth circuses, as do many in Europe. Youth circus is circus created and performed by youth, as opposed to entertainment for youth. Since the 1970s, youth circuses have used circus arts to instill in young people qualities they need to survive and thrive in society, teaching them the art of life through circus, building character and inspiring youth, especially those at risk. And I'm going to use these 3 programs as exemplars for the next part of the talk. These activities train and challenge cognitive skills. They're cognitively demanding, and they train the executive functions. Here's a very short little video.
The movement itself is very challenging, and they're constantly changing directions, changing counts. People are doing things at different times. That's a big concept for kids at this age.
It's a lot easier to focus, because when you learn to focus on something that's fun, sometimes, if you want to, you can learn to focus on something that's not so fun.
Also, all of these programs have children teaching children. Abreu said, the person who knows 3 notes is the teacher to the person who knows 2 notes. And it turns out that child-to-child teaching has repeatedly been shown to yield much better results than our teaching children. Adults teaching children isn't nearly as beneficial as children teaching children. Executive functions depend on prefrontal cortex and the other neural regions with which it is interconnected. Prefrontal cortex is the newest area of the brain over evolution and the most vulnerable. If you're sad or stressed, lonely, or not physically fit, prefrontal cortex and executive functions are the first to suffer and suffer the most. Conversely, we show better executive functions when we're happy, feel socially supported, and we're healthy and physically fit. Our brains work better when we're not in a stressed emotional state, and that's particularly true for prefrontal cortex and executive functions. Stress impairs executive functions and can cause anyone to look as if you have an executive function impairment like ADHD, when you don't at all, you're simply stressed. I'm sure that some of the children diagnosed with ADHD in school, who are in school, don't have ADHD. They simply are having very stressed lives that the teachers aren't aware of. You may have noticed that when you're stressed, you can't think as clearly or exercise as good self-control. When I'm stressed, I reach for the chocolate. Now, here are some of the biological reasons for why that's true. I'll just be very quick. Even mild stress dramatically increases the level of the neurotransmitter dopamine in prefrontal. And it doesn't do that anywhere else in the brain. Now, prefrontal cortex needs dopamine. Your car engine needs gasoline. But if you flood your car engine with gasoline, your car engine can't work so well. And if you flood prefrontal cortex with dopamine, it can't work so well. So mild stress selectively impacts dopamine in prefrontal, not elsewhere in the brain. Also, in primates, including us, prefrontal cortex has more receptors for cortisol than any other area of the brain. So when you're stressed and your body gives off cortisol, it's going to hit prefrontal cortex more than any other area of the brain. And even mild stress disrupts the functional connectivity, the communication between prefrontal cortex and other areas of the brain. A few weeks of stress in preparation for a major exam disrupts communication between prefrontal cortex and other brain regions. And of course, it impairs executive functions. Luckily, it comes back when the stress is gone. When we're sad, we're worse at selective attention. When we're happy, we're better at selective attention. People show more creativity when they're happy. The most heavily researched predictor of creativity in social psychology is mood. The most robust finding is that a happy mood leads to greater creativity. It enables people to work more flexibly and to see potential relatedness among unusual and atypical members of categories. It's not that sadder people are less creative than happier ones, but that in general, and of course there are exceptions, in general, an individual tends to be more creative when that person is happier than when that person is more miserable. Okay? So it doesn't mean that depressed people can't be incredibly creative, but in general, a depressed person tends to be more creative when they're less depressed, rather than when they're in the depths of the depression. It's important that children do things that give them joy. These activities, NDI, National Dance Institute, Elsie Stemma, and Social Youth Circus, engage children's passionate enthusiasm. You can see the joy on their faces. And joy is not the opposite of serious. In fact, there should be no clear distinction between play and work, because if you're really enjoying your work, it feels like play. Okay, so look at these pictures and think to yourself whether they're playing or whether they're working. Serious business like learning can and should be joyful. Research shows we learn more and get more done when we're happy. There's no reason why learning can't be joyful. When it is, there's no clear distinction between work and play. So these kids are doing math, but they're loving it. These two little boys are with their grandfather, who's a famous violinist. And this boy is having a great time in the kitchen, making his own kind of music. This little boy is grating a potato, and this little girl is helping in the kitchen measuring beans. Watering plants. Is it work or is it play? Is this work or play? Kids love doing these kinds of things. Children need to believe in themselves. These programs, National Dance Institute, Elsie Stemma Youth Circus, provide joy and build feelings of pride and self-confidence. Another short little
It
bit.
meets them in a way that allows them to just move ahead a little at a time. And the little at a time that they move ahead, they very slowly develop a belief in themselves.
So one of the great things in Venezuela is they don't worry about going wrong. Going wrong for them is just something you do on the way to going right.
Last year at the proms, here in the Royal Albert Hall, something amazing happened. A huge orchestra of kids from the shanty towns of Venezuela came to play Shostakovich's 10th Symphony.
For kids that maybe haven't succeeded in anything else, maybe don't speak very well, don't do math, you see these kids getting better at everything because it gives them that kind of investment in their own identity. As I can do this.
We set the bar really high, and you know what? Children come to that place. I mean, you go in there with those expectations, and they rise to them.
It's not an audition program. Every child participates, and if they commit, they are guaranteed success.
We need to let children know it's okay to make mistakes. The only alternative is to stay with what you already know and stop growing, right? Because by definition, if you go beyond what you know, you don't know. You have a 50% chance of being wrong. So if you want to make sure that you never make a mistake, the only way to do that is stay with what you already know. But if you stay with what you already know, you can't grow. So you have to be willing to make a mistake, to venture beyond what you already know. Children need to feel safe, to push the limits of what they know, to venture into the unknown, to take the risk of making a mistake or being wrong. They can't relax if they're worried that you might embarrass them. They can't relax if they feel a lot of pressure to always succeed and never mess up. Making a mistake is not the worst thing in the world. Even the people you most respect make mistakes and have done things they regret. Everyone makes mistakes and everyone is imperfect. Imperfect is not the same as worthless. That's really important, and we forget it because we get so down on ourselves when we make a mistake. Marshall Marcus is the head of El Sistema in Europe, and he said, going wrong is just something you do on the way to going right. Making a mistake is not a problem. Suffering embarrassment because you made a mistake is a problem. The important thing is how you react after you've made a mistake or fallen short of a goal. I love this quote, and I particularly love it because of who said it. You've never failed until you've tried for the last time, and you've never lost until you quit. Samuel Proctor Macy was born in the segregated South in the early 1900s. You know he encountered a lot of discrimination, setbacks, and failures. Yet he rose to become one of the most highly respected and decorated chemists of the 20th century. You haven't failed till you stop trying. Our brains work better when we're not feeling lonely or socially isolated. And that's particularly true for prefrontal cortex and executive functions. People who feel lonely or are focused on anticipating being alone show worse executive functions than people who feel or anticipate feeling more socially supported. And there's lots of research on this, both at the level of prefrontal cortex and at the level of executive functions. We are fundamentally social. We need to belong. We need to fit in and be liked. Children who are lonely or ostracized have more difficulty learning. Okay, another video that talks about how these programs meet children's needs for social support and belonging.
The skill within El Sistema that you learn is not your instrument. That's not the primary skill. The primary skill is working together. It's actually using the orchestra as a metaphor for how we work together as a society. Maestro Breu is this famous phrase, the person who can play 3 notes is the teacher to the person who can play 2 notes.
When the children dance, their differences disappear, and they all become dancers, an ensemble of dancers.
It really teaches you to work with each other, not just an individual, but that they must count on each other, trust each other, be aware of each other, listen to each other.
So, what is art cirque? Circus, in fact, is just a pretext to create a circle of trust, and it's a space where people can communicate with each other. An area where you can work on yourself, trust the other, and dream.
And we're not just intellects, emotions, and social, we also have bodies. And our brains work better when our bodies are physically fit. This is particularly true for prefrontal cortex and executive functions. People who are more physically active and have better aerobic fitness have better executive functions. The brain doesn't recognize the same sharp division between cognitive and motor function that we impose in our thinking. The same or substantially overlapping brain systems subserve both cognitive and motor functions. For example, an area of the brain called the pre-SMA is important for sequential tasks. And it doesn't matter whether they're sequential motor tasks or sequential cognitive ones. Motor development and cognitive development appear to be fundamentally intertwined. These activities that NDI, LC Stemma, Youth Circus improve motor skills and physical fitness. It's probably very obvious. Certainly, they help develop bimanual and eye-hand coordination, lung capacity, strength and flexibility. Contrary to influential reviews of the benefits of aerobic exercise, exercise without a cognitive component and maybe without a social component, so, for example, riding on a stationary bike or running on a treadmill, produces little or no cognitive benefit, none, not to memory, not to executive functions. Exercise alone appears not to be as effective in improving executive functions as exercise plus character development, such as traditional martial arts, exercise plus mindfulness, such as yoga, or other exercise that requires thought, such as soccer or circus. Lakes and Hoyt randomly assigned children in grades kindergarten through grade 5, either to traditional Taekwondo or standard phys ed. And what they found is that the kids assigned to Taekwondo showed greater gains than children in standard phys ed on all the dimensions of executive function they studied. This generalized to multiple contexts and was found on multiple measures. There's also evidence that any benefit of physical activity for cognition may be proportional to how much joy the physical activity brings. Boring exercise is particularly unlikely to yield cognitive benefits. The different parts of the human being are fundamentally interrelated. Each part, cognitive, spiritual, social, emotional, and physical, is affected by and affects the others. The best and most efficient way to foster any one of these is to foster all of them. We have to care about children's emotional, social, and physical well-being if we want them to be able to problem solve, exercise self-control, or display any of the other executive functions. If a child is stressed, sad, lonely, or not physically fit, the very academic performance the school is trying to improve will take a hit. Returning to my prediction, activities will most successfully improve executive functions will not only work on directly improving them by training and challenging them, but indirectly by lessening things that impair them, like stress or loneliness, and enhancing things that support them, like joy or physical vitality. What activities directly train and challenge executive functions, and indirectly support them by also addressing our social, emotional, and physical needs? Traditional activities that have been around for millennia. For tens of thousands of years across all cultures, storytelling, dance, art, music, and play have been part of the human condition. People in all cultures made music, sang, danced, did sports, and played games. There are good reasons why those activities have lasted so long and arose everywhere. They challenge our intellect, they make us happy and proud, they address our social needs, and help our bodies develop. Key is that the child really enjoy the activity and really want to do it, so that he or she will spend a lot of time at it, pushing him or herself to improve. And I don't care what the activity is, as long as the child really wants to do it and will spend the time and effort, and it hits those notes that I mentioned. So it could be any number of things. Here are just a few. It could be caring for an animal. It could be doing a service activity. It could be doing anything outdoors in nature or gardening. I fear that activities needed for children to thrive, the arts, physical activity, and play, are being cut from school curricula and children's lives. What if mainstream education has it all wrong? Focusing exclusively on training cognition, as mainstream education tends to do, may not be the best or most efficient way to improve cognition. Addressing children's social, emotional, and physical needs may be key to whether they do well in school and in life. While it may seem logical that if you want to improve academic outcomes, you should concentrate on academic instruction alone, not everything that seems logical is correct. To show the executive functions they're capable of, to achieve the academic outcomes they're capable of, children need to feel relaxed and happy, not be stressed. They need to feel they're in a supportive community they can count on, and their bodies need to be fit and healthy. If a child is emotionally, socially, and physically nourished in these ways, that child is more likely to show the full cognitive ability of which he or she is capable and do better in school. On the other hand, if a child is stressed, sad, lonely, or not physically fit, the very academic performance a school is trying to improve will take a hit. What nourishes the human spirit may also be best for executive functions. Nurturing children socially, emotionally, cognitively, and physically, as the arts, play, and physical activity can do, may be critical for achieving the outcomes we all want for our children. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.